In the mid-1990s, the world was spinning to the sound of 5 British girls who called themselves the Spice Girls. They weren't just a pop band, they were a cultural phenomenon. Each member had a nickname that captured her persona: sporty, scary, baby, ginger, and posh. Victoria Adams didn't fit the usual pop stereotype. She wasn't loud or playful on stage. She was quiet, composed, always impeccably dressed. In a group defined by chaos and color, she stood out for her restraint. The nickname Posh Spice came from Top of the Pops magazine in 1996, a playful reference to her polished style and reserved attitude. The name stuck, and with it came a public image she would never fully escape. Managed by Simon Fuller, the Spice Girls became a global brand, and Victoria's elegance added sophistication to their chaos. For millions of fans, she represented confidence and control. For Victoria herself, it became a kind of armor, and sometimes a cage. The media quickly turned her into a favorite target. Tabloids obsessed over her weight, her smile, her fashion choices. Headlines labeled her too thin, too cold, too perfect. She realized early on that the less she said, the fewer words could be twisted. So she chose silence, not out of arrogance, but self-protection. Years later, she would describe how she learned to say nothing and let the work speak. That quiet control became her signature. Yet behind it was a young woman trying to reconcile 2 identities: Victoria, the person, and Posh, the brand. The distinction blurred more with every photo shoot, every headline, every stage appearance. Posh Spice wasn't just a nickname. It was the first version of a persona that would follow her for decades. It defined her, protected her, and often overshadowed her. And as the world fell in love with Posh, Victoria Adams slowly disappeared behind the image she had created. By the late 90s, Victoria's fame had outgrown the Spice Girls. She was no longer just Posh Spice. She was a permanent fixture in the tabloids, photographed everywhere she went. But the attention came with a cruel edge. Every appearance was dissected. Her clothes, her figure, even her facial expressions. She was praised and criticized in equal measure. The image that had once empowered her now seemed beyond her control. In interviews years later, Victoria admitted that she learned early on to be careful, to control what she shared, how she looked, how she moved. Discipline became her safety net. She once told Vogue, "I've always been a perfectionist. It's who I am." That perfectionism wasn't vanity. It was a defense mechanism in a world that constantly judged her. The tabloids, especially in the UK, were relentless. They published zoomed-in photos of her body, speculated about her weight, and gave her nicknames like the Ice Queen. Yet she rarely responded. Her silence became her strategy, and in its own way, a form of quiet resistance. Those who worked with her described her as meticulous, focused, and demanding of herself. Stylists and assistants have often remarked that Victoria never does casual. Every detail of her presentation, posture, tone, clothing, was deliberate. Even her half-smile, somewhere between confidence and restraint, became part of the Victoria Beckham signature. The irony was striking. The more she tried to control her image, the more distant she appeared. The armor that once protected her began to isolate her. And that need for control was about to be tested like never before, because her next chapter would place her beside one of the most famous men in the world. And even the most polished armor can crack under the spotlight. Fame surrounded her with people, stylists, cameras, fans, yet left her profoundly alone. Every room was crowded, but she often felt like the quietest person in it. To protect herself, she built walls of elegance. Beautiful, but impenetrable. When Victoria Adams married David Beckham in July 1999, it wasn't just a wedding, it was a global media event. The ceremony took place at Luttrellstown Castle in Ireland, complete with matching ivory outfits, a throne-like setting, and exclusive photo rights sold to OK magazine. It marked the beginning of what the press quickly called Brand Beckham, two British icons from different worlds, pop and football, merging into a single power couple. Months later, as she became a mother for the first time, the tabloids turned her joy into scrutiny. Instead of celebrating her, they picked apart her body after birth, measuring her like a product, not a person. Even motherhood, it seemed, had to look perfect. Their combined fame was unprecedented. Every public appearance drew attention. Every photo became a headline. Over the years, they transformed their visibility into opportunity. Endorsement deals, advertising campaigns, and eventually their own product lines, from fragrances to fashion. Victoria once told The Guardian, "We're a team. Everything we do together." It wasn't just love, it was strategy. But the intensity of public life came at a cost. The couple lived under constant surveillance from tabloids and paparazzi. When David transferred to Real Madrid in 2003, the scrutiny reached new heights. Spanish and British media speculated endlessly about their marriage, especially after allegations of infidelity surfaced. Victoria, often photographed expressionless beside him, appeared unshaken in public. In the 2023 Beckham Netflix documentary, both she and David reflected on that time, calling it incredibly difficult and the hardest period of our marriage. In Spain, away from her usual support system and unable to speak the language fluently, Victoria relied on the one thing she could control: her image. Every outfit, every pose, every appearance was deliberate. The same discipline that once defined Posh Spice now defined her as a wife, mother, and public figure. And it worked. Despite the rumors, the couple's unity and resilience strengthened their brand. They became a modern fairy tale for the celebrity age. Beautiful, coordinated, and seemingly unbreakable. But behind the composure was a familiar pattern: perfection as protection. Their love was real, but it existed under the weight of expectation. Together, they turned fame into empire, and empire into endurance. And as the world admired the Beckham's empire, Victoria began to build one of her own. One that would test everything she'd learned about image, power, and identity. When Victoria Beckham entered the world of high fashion, few took her seriously. A former pop star launching a designer label sounded more like celebrity vanity than creative vision. But Victoria was determined to prove otherwise. In 2008, she introduced her first collection, a small, carefully curated line of fitted dresses with clean lines, sculpted silhouettes, and understated luxury. It was her way of reinventing herself, distancing from the pop image that had once defined her. Industry insiders were skeptical at first, yet when her debut was shown during New York Fashion Week, critics were surprised. The response was largely positive. Vogue praised her focus and discipline, noting that she knows what women want to wear. The collection reflected her personal aesthetic: minimalism, structure, control. The very qualities that once made her seem distant now became her signature style. Over the next decade, Victoria Beckham Limited evolved into a recognized luxury brand, with a dedicated following among celebrities and fashion editors. But behind the praise, financial challenges persisted. While the label earned respect, it struggled to turn a profit. Company filings showed consistent annual losses, and by 2019, The Guardian and BBC reported that the brand had accumulated over £50 million in debt. Despite the financial strain, Victoria pressed forward, often repeating in interviews that she believed in building a brand with longevity. She appeared calm and poised, her expression revealing nothing of the pressure beneath. For her, fashion was more than business. It was a statement, a way to redefine herself from being seen as the footballer's wife to a serious designer. And though her company's financials told one story, her creative persistence told another: endurance. Still, the cost of perfection was high. Balancing public life, motherhood, and an unprofitable brand took its toll. Behind the glossy presentations were reports of long hours, high pressure, and the endless demand to prove her credibility. Even success brought its own tension. Because for Victoria Beckham, fashion wasn't only about beauty, it was about control. And control, as she had learned, always comes at a price. For years, Victoria Beckham communicated more through images than through words. Her Instagram became an extension of her brand, polished, carefully curated, rarely spontaneous. Smiles were subtle, vulnerability rare. But in the 2023 Netflix documentary Beckham, viewers finally saw a glimpse behind that composure. The series offered a more personal look at Victoria, witty, self-aware, and occasionally fragile. For the first time in decades, the world wasn't watching Posh. They were watching Victoria. The documentary peeled back layers built over years of fame. In one scene, she jokingly claimed she came from a working-class background, only for David to tease her. Be honest. What car did your dad drive you to school in? Her answer, a Rolls-Royce, became a viral moment. A small but striking example of how image and perception have always intertwined in her life. The series also touched on the toll of constant media attention. For more than 2 decades, every aspect of her appearance and personality had been scrutinized. She acknowledged how difficult it was to grow up in public, especially while raising a family under the spotlight. She has previously spoken about how fame affected her confidence and body image, not framing it as an illness, but admitting that the pressure to look perfect became a constant companion. Family scenes in the series, dinners, laughter, her children joking with their parents, revealed a softer, more grounded side. Yet even those moments carried traces of discipline. Victoria remained composed, thoughtful, deliberate, the same traits that had built her empire. Critics called it both humanizing and controlled, the perfect reflection of her life. She allowed the audience closer than ever before, yet still on her own terms. For Victoria, control isn't just habit. It's a language she's fluent in. After decades of being labeled and defined by others, pop star, wife, mother, designer, she learned to shape the story before it shaped her. But the price of that control is visible between the lines: the vigilance, the perfectionism, the fear of missteps. Behind the brand stands a woman who spent half her life proving she deserved respect, and the other half learning how to protect it. In October 2025, Netflix released a new documentary simply titled Victoria Beckham, a 3-part series focusing entirely on her own journey, not as Posh Spice or as David Beckham's wife, but as a woman who built an identity from the fragments of fame. Unlike the 2023 Beckham series, this new production centered on Victoria's perspective, her creative process, her perfectionism, and her long struggle to be taken seriously in the world of fashion. The show revealed unseen footage from her studio, conversations with her design team, and reflections on the early years when editors dismissed her collections as celebrity projects. Viewers saw a more candid side, moments of doubt, laughter, and even vulnerability, as she admitted how often she still questions herself despite global success. Critics described it as her most honest portrayal yet, though some noted that even in honesty, Victoria remained precise and composed. The documentary underscored the paradox that defines her life: transparency through control. And as the cameras fade, one question remains. After all these years, is Victoria Beckham finally free? Today, Victoria Beckham stands at the center of a carefully built empire: fashion, beauty, family, and legacy. On paper, it's everything she once set out to achieve. But perhaps her most intricate creation isn't her brand or her business. It's herself. Her story isn't one of scandal, but of transformation. It reflects how modern fame blurs the line between authenticity and performance. How women in the spotlight are expected to be both powerful and flawless. Victoria managed that contradiction better than most. She turned public ridicule into respect. Yet there's something poignant about her success. Even now, with creative authority and global admiration, she still carries the composure that once shielded her. That stillness, which the public reads as confidence, may also be the residue of years spent under pressure. She once said, "If I smile, they say I've had surgery. If I don't, they say I'm miserable." It summed up her entire relationship with fame. A woman trapped between what the world demanded and who she really was. Occasionally, the mask slips: a laugh in an interview, a warm glance toward David, an unguarded smile caught on camera. In those moments, she feels most human. And that's the tragic truth about Victoria Beckham, that perfection made her unstoppable, but never untouchable.